Welcome to A Procurement Podcast, the Reform Rundown, with your hosts Chris Robinson and Fleur Summers.
Over the course of this series, Fleur and I will be discussing some of the main themes and concepts surrounding the Procurement Act 2023 and what it will mean to the public sector ahead of launch. Fleur and I have a combined 40 years public sector procurement experience and will be using some of that experience to share our knowledge and insights around the Act itself.
So let's get into today's topic. Welcome to A Procurement Podcast, the Reform Rundown. This is our second recording in a series of podcasts that we are doing, and you are listening to your hosts, Fleur Summers and Chris Robinson.
During this podcast, we will provide a high-level summary of what we believe to be the key themes and concepts within the Procurement Act of 2023 and the impact upon the public sector in relation to its procurement activity. Make sure that you check out our first podcast where we provide an overview of the series, but also a bit of background into our procurement experience and what we think the new Act will bring.
We are going to have a look as part of this podcast, look at the brief overview of why we have the Procurement Act and the high-level themes that we are seeing as part of it. We'll also look to take a deeper dive in some future podcasts into these key themes, so make sure to look out for these when they are released.
So as we know, the reform of the procurement rules was brought about following the UK's exit from the European Union, meaning that there was an ideal opportunity to review the existing regulations and update them to enable more flexible, modern and innovative approaches to procurement.
As with the existing regulations that we have now, the Act that we have is the overarching legislative framework. And we know that there will be supporting regulations, secondary legislation, as well as formal policy guidance put in place, which will supplement the new Act.
So when the Act itself dropped in October of last year, 2023, Fleur and I took a look at the content of that Act itself. And within this podcast, we are going to tease out what we believe to be the main themes within that particular Act. So starting off here, we're of the view that greater flexibility for authorities to shape procurements and use different purchasing systems and framework arrangements, adopting both an open and closed approach will be one of the main features.
I think that's going to be one of the key areas, isn't it? Flexibility and what we're saying.
For sure.
But also there's going to be a shift towards including more social value and sustainability elements beyond just pricing. So as you know, we used to have most economically advantageous tender or MEET, but we are now going to be having most advantageous tender, or now it's going to be known as MAT.
This is not new ground in terms of public sector procurement by way of practices and procedures, but mandatory and discretionary grounds have always been around within the PCRs. But what we'll be seeing within the Act itself now is, together with an introduction of a department register to list companies excluded for serious breaches, in addition to those discretionary grounds to include potential exclusion for a breach of contract, poor performance, or perhaps for acting improperly in a procurement exercise itself.
We're also going to see the introduction of a new pandemic clause as part of the direct award ability, which is going to increase the ability to direct award contracts if considered necessary to protect human life, animal or plant life or health, or protect public order or safety.
Another element of particular note is these safe harbours, justifying the modification of awarded contracts during the life of them within their term, again to protect the life of the contract or to deal with the materialisation of a known risk, for example.
So I think we're going to just have a quick chat, aren't we, as part of this podcast around some of the key themes and concepts that we have sort of come up with from all our reading of information that we've seen so far. And I think one of the key things that we're going to see is a much more increased focus on contract management and introduction of a contract management register. That's going to be something that is massive change to public sector authorities.
For sure, and definitely going to require a heavy amount of resourcing as
definitely.
well. I mean, I think from what we've read and learned and heard, Fleur, from the Act itself, is that contracts equal to or above £5 million in value are going to have at least 3 key performance indicators within them. And when you look at that and you think about not only having KPIs in place, of course they have to follow the traditional SMART principles and be relevant to the procured subject matter itself. But this all needs resourcing and careful planning, and a little bit of foresight to be able to provide these and have them evident in a tender documentation, obviously before the contract award itself. Not to mention then, of course, what we've learned from the Act in that there will be a requirement on an annual basis
to publish the KPIs and the notices. It's going to be a massive amount of work. That's in addition to what is currently being done.
Definitely. And again, as we've touched on just now, one of the other new features that are being brought out by the Act itself is this debarment list, or as I've been calling it, a naughty boy or naughty girl register. Again, Fleur, I mean, when you look at that, I think the intention behind it and the idea is a positive one. But including suppliers on a list where they've, perhaps maybe been involved in a misdemeanor or not performed in relation to the KPIs that have been set out in the contracts. Exactly. What do you think will be the appetite of public sector organisations in terms of their contribution towards that?
I think it's going to be new to them, isn't it? It's obviously linked into the mandatory and discretionary exclusions and how that's managed, because that's going to have to form part of the checks in terms of whether they're excluded, excludable, that kind of thing. I think it's just all new, isn't it, in terms of getting heads around what needs to be incorporated in processes to make sure that they carry out this due diligence, to make sure that it's all what they're doing and who they're awarding to is correct.
Definitely. And I think one thing to make absolutely apparent to the listener is that within these key themes, as we're calling them here, we are going to do designated recordings where we're going to take a deeper dive into each one of these.
Some of these areas are really big, aren't they?
Massive, for sure. I mean, again, you look at the idea and the increased emphasis around the encouragement of innovative approaches, and flexibility. We talked about this in the first recording. I think I made a reference to the stabilisers being taken off. The public procuring organisations are going to have to be much more creative, but I think they should embrace that opportunity.
I think and I think I mentioned it as part of the first podcast. It's definitely an area of flexibility where I think it's been needed for a while. Whilst we've had set processes, haven't we, in terms of what you can and can't do, I think it's going to give that massive ability to be able to say, okay, well, actually, I'm buying for, I don't know, X, Y, Z, and this is how that market likes to do, and can I then try and tailor it to that market? And instead of just having to be like, well, no, not necessarily, because we need to fit with this process. It's okay, let's see what we can and can't do. But will we see that? Will we see that straight away, or will it take time for that to come in? I think it's going to take a while before people are starting to think, actually, I could do this, where it's like, I'll just stay over here with this process.
It's confidence, isn't it? It's having that confidence to do that, definitely. Now, for everything that we're pulling out here in terms of the Act and what we know and the regulations to follow, of course, there is a significant amount of grey areas, I would suggest. And
we have it open.
Definitely. And we have that in the public contract regulations at the moment as well, of course. And, I think that does give an element of freedom, for public procuring bodies to explore and push those boundaries. But one of the things that's certainly open and unsure of at this moment in time is the national variations. Now,
that's still an unknown, really, isn't it?
It is. And you certainly don't want me getting on my soapbox around this, but I think you can probably preempt what I'm about to say. It's interesting, isn't it, that we've been provided an opportunity to move away from the European Union regulations and OJU and everything that's brought out about that, to have UK-centric regulations. And yet there is an element of irony attached to this, because certainly at this moment in time, the intention is for the whole of the UK to adopt everything that's in the Act and the regulations. But of course, we have the matter of national variances that are being discussed at this moment in time, predominantly in Scotland, but also Wales too. So we're yet to determine how, in full or in part, these nations within the United Kingdom will fully adopt the regulations.
That's going to be an interesting area to see coming out, isn't it? In terms of, are they going to be different? Are they going to be the same? How is that going to be managed?
Definitely.
That's going to be
interesting. It is, for sure.
And I think another key area that we've got is in terms of the new notices and the changes in them. So different terminology and what they mean and what we've been used to. So, for example, we've got the contract award notice. We all know when we would have used one of those as part of a procurement process. But going forwards, that's going to be actually even notice that starts standstill, which is a whole different mindset to it. having your standstill letters to start standstill. It's your contract award notice that's going to start your standstill. And then you have a contract details notice that is going to be needed just to say you've entered into the contract, as well as all other different notices. And some that you might have known as a PIN, for example, is going to be a planned procurement notice. There's just the whole concept of terminology and changes and new notices. I think it's massive for anyone who's been in procurement, like you and me.
Yes.
For a while. We know that notice does this, and it's going to be, oh, hang on.
Do you know what it feels like? And you know that I'm into my retro gaming, but it's like you look at the public contract regulations and how long they've been in place right now. And of course, you know, public procuring bodies across the UK are familiar with those, as me and you are. But having the Act now in place and the regulations to follow, it almost feels like someone's hit that reset button.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
And all of us, whether or not you've been in public procurement 2 weeks or 20
like us,
years, like us. Yeah. You know, 16, 20 years plus.
We're all going to be learning
We
new
are.
terminology altogether.
And, you know, the point that you raise on the notices and the new notices themselves, many of which are exactly that. They are new notices. So it's a new practice and procedure that the sector's going to have to familiarise themselves with.
Yeah.
I think one of the positive elements, and there is a lot of positive, you know, which we'll talk about in future recordings as well, is around the increased emphasis of looking to support SMEs. Something that the sector's struggled with previously, I'd suggest, Fleur.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that all links back to one of the other key things, isn't it? Transparency. There's going to be so much more information that we're going to have to provide. So there's going to be a lot more details that the suppliers are going to be able to see. And hopefully that will break down some of the barriers, because they'll be able to get more understanding as to how we want to procure things, or if we can do more things flexibly. We can try and tailor, if we know that the market is more of an SME focused market, we can try and tailor it that way. So I think a lot of these key themes that we're talking to all link in together.
Certainly do, definitely. And I think what I'd like to do then, almost like as a final one, but I'll wrap it up as a 2-in-1, Fleur, if you don't mind. A bit dangerous, this, isn't it? Is again, and it's evident, it's black and white, it's there in the Act, it was there in the green paper, the white paper before that, was, you know, again, the encouragement around both sustainability and social value.
Yeah. And that again links into the change from meat to mat, and more emphasis not necessarily on price, but you can incorporate more on social value. Sure. That's definitely.
So what are you suggesting then there, Fleur? Do you think there'll be no more public procuring bodies paying lip service to social value and just attributing a nominal value of 2 or 5%, as I certainly have seen in the past? Do you think that again, greater creativity and relevance around social value outcomes and evaluation exercises?
I would hope so, mixed in with more flexibility to do things differently. I think you'll start to see more social value being included. Definitely.
And on the sustainability piece as well, you know, that again in its own right is a separate subject matter, isn't it? And, you know, sustainable procurement, and traditionally you'd see public procuring organisations just asking the question, supplier X, do you have the appropriate 2400 ISO standard around sustainable procurement? Namely, do you vet your wider supply chain? And that almost become a prerequisite. Well, I think we'll be expecting to see now, or certainly the Act will be suggesting, and the regs will be steering public procuring organisations around the path of, is actually vetting that wider supply chain, wearing the hat of sustainable procurement, and trying to drive value and positive outcomes from that sustainable perspective.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, just in terms of that quick summary that we've just done there, I think it's massive changes, isn't it? Just on those, we haven't even really gone into anything in detail, but just on those few points, there's a lot we can talk about going forwards.
Tip of the iceberg. Tip of the iceberg, absolutely.
So in terms of that, thank you everyone for listening to our second podcast in our series. So this was just a rundown of a few of the key themes and concepts that we see. So we will be doing some more deep dives into some of these areas. So make sure you tune in to listen to some more of Chris and Fleur and the Procurement Reform Rundown.